Good evening, we're on. Good evening. Okay, so we're in chapter 17. Perik, where are we? Not 17. 19, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And we're talking about the Bia Chelkei Chasidus, the divisions, the different parts of Chasidus. And as he said at the beginning, that Chasidus is divided into three different sections. The first is the Maaseh, what constitutes a saintly act. I don't like the word saintly, but let's use it. An act of Chasidus. Hasheni is ba'oifene asiyah, not just what you do, but how you do it. And the third is the kavanah, the intention that is behind the way that you do this act of Chasidus. Now, we're still in the first part, and I was hoping to finish off the first part tonight, B'ezrat Hashem. Okay, so we got up to last week, if I remember. He started talking about being makpid, coming down on the people of your family and your household. And the next thing we talked about, V'lo tzadi b'fnei mi shegodel mimeni. I never walked in front of somebody who was greater than me, and as we said last week, this doesn't mean the Godel Ador. This means anybody who was greater than me in Torah or in my Simtovim. When Me'eka Adin, that would be permitted, but Midas Chassidus is not to do such a thing. V'lo harti b'mavois ha-metunofois. And I never had thoughts of Divrei Torah thoughts, chidushim or whatever, novel ideas in the understanding of the Gemara in places which were unclean. Now, I mean, practically speaking, nowadays it's not such a problem. In those days, the world was very different. There were open sewers. There were definitely places where it was impossible and asur. So, why is this midas chasidus? I mean, it's an issur to speak divrei Torah and to think divrei Torah too. So it's a beautiful story here. So Don Zegels brings an idea. So you need. I'll read it in Hebrew. But Rabbi Zeira is talking about Rabbi Zeira, was on a very high level. All of his complete metzius was Torah. I mean, nowadays we can also find people who you see are just completely kol Torah, kol Torah, kol kula Torah. Everything is Torah from the moment they wake up. Every moment, every word they say is in some way connected to Torah, to a Torah thought, to a halacha, to a word which connects them to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Everything. So Rabbi Zeira was for sure like that. And this was for him, an Nisoyim, Gadol Ma'od, a very great test. Shelo laharhe b'divrei Torah, v'afal pikein, hu ha'id al atzmo shelo yireh b'divrei Torah, v'mvoas ha'metunofos. In other words, somebody like this is why it's midas chasidus, because somebody like this who is constantly involved in Torah, whose whole mind is given over to Torah, for him it's a very great Nisoyim in a place where it's us of him to do it, to, so to speak, to cut off from that. He says, we know that the Yetzer Hara really goes to great trouble, and dok b'tishkach, check it and see. Shaharbe pa'amim davka k'sha'adam nichnas l'mokum she'osa lahare al divrei Torah. Specifically, davka at that time, when a person goes into the bathroom or such a place, miyad olim baroisha chidushim upilpulim divrei Torah. Right? What happens is you go, the first thing that comes into your mind, like I've had this happen to me. You're about to give a shir and you have to go to the bathroom, and suddenly you walk into the Torah and this idea springs into your mind. So it's very difficult to push it out of your mind. Bishvil hatzliach shelo lahare. So he says this is not something you can just rely on your reactions. A person has to daven that Kodesh Baruch Hu, when you send me these thoughts, please, don't let me think about them when I'm in the bathroom. Shemova Shemi Shaloi Med Torah Lishma Lo Korim Loi Divrei Ka'elim. And it seems to me that somebody who's learning Torah Lishma, that these things don't happen to him. With Divrei HaMesilas Yesharim Anu Roim, we see Shahu Moina Es Ha'inyan Shel Hirharti Shelo Hirharti B'Vos Novus B'Chol Mishnas Chasidim. So you see, he says this means that for a person who clearly is on that level, it must be that he is his intentions are entirely pure, to be saved from something, because this is really a midas chasidus. B'derech klal, most ordinary people will have this problem, and Rabbi Zera, who was called Kula Torah, didn't have this problem. And he says the way around this is because, first of all, is tefillah, and also if a person is learning and teaching totally lishma on that level, then Hashem will protect him from that. Okay. V'lo alachti ba'arba amos below Torah u below tefillin. So he also says that all his days were, he had the Ol Malchus Shemaim, the yoke of the kingdom of heaven upon him. So I see I made a sign here. Let's see why. Lo yoshanti bebeis hamedrash, lo shanas kevav, lo shanas aray. And I never slept in the beis hamedrash, whether it was a fixed sleep, maybe longer than 20 minutes, or even a shinas aray, something less than 20 minutes. V'zu chasidus be'kibud beis hamedrash. That is the idea of chasidus in kibud beis hamedrash. Why? Because Rabbi Zera, we can assume that somebody who makes the Beis HaMedrash his home, and we know people in this yeshiva, and I think we know who they are, who just are in the Beis HaMedrash from night to morning. They never seem to leave. So somebody like that, for sure, because the Beis HaMedrash is his home, it would be mutter for him to eat and mutter for him to sleep, because that's basically that's his home. That's where he is the whole time. So we can assume that Rabbi Zera would fall into that category. The midas chasidus is that even though it would have been permissible for somebody who makes the bedroom Beis HaMedrash his home to sleep, he never did, even though he was there day and night. Yeah. So that's the point that he wants to bring out there. Okay. So the next thing is, we've got down to so then we carry on. Velos sasti takolos chaverai. I never rejoiced in the downfall and the problems that my friends had. I mean, obviously, must be friends who he wasn't particularly friendly with, but fellows. Velo karasi la chaveri b'hachinoisoi. So we saw this before. I never called them a nickname. We've talked about those ideas before. Harilacha masa chasidus mikol hadrachim. Okay, we mentioned all these things above. Omar Oidi also says in Bava Kama Lamed Amad Aleph. Omar Rabbi Yehuda said, Rabbi Yehuda, Haiman the boy lemeheve chasida. How do you get to the level of chasidus? L'kaim mili de brochos. He should be mekayim the words of brochos. And it's a machlokas over there, because others say let him be mekayim the laws of nezikin, of damages, and there's another one that some other says amilei lekaim mili da avos. You should uphold the words of what it says pikei avos, which is basically ethical teachings. So what's going on here? In other words, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, somebody who wants to be a chassid, he should just do one of these things, and he doesn't have to do the others. The Mandoma says the brochas, then you don't have to look out for nezikin. You don't have to. Clearly, that can't be the case. So, what is the machlokas here? So, I think the idea is let's identify these. Brochas is basically between Adam and Mokom, between Hashem, man and God. A blessing is something which constructs as a reflection of a relationship of a person with God. Mili de nezikin, damages are concerned with man and his fellow. How not to damage other people, and if one does damage another person, how do you pay them, what you're responsible for and what you're not responsible for, etc., etc. Now, the Overs is really a combination of both of them. So the question is, again, it can't be that one to the exclusion of the other two. I was thinking, is which one is the easiest approach, or to get to all three, which one should you start with first? Should you start with Ben Adam Lamokum? Should you start Ben Adam Levechavero? Or should you start with a synthesis of the two? I think that's basically what the argument is about. What's the best approach? And of course, in that it's possible to, have a disagreement, given that, of course, you have to be Mekayim all of them, you have to observe all of them, but which one is going to be the best approach? Now, something I saw here, where was it? I think it was in Rav Segal's book, is it's impossible to say that what he means to be Mekayim Midid the Brachas means that you should say blessings. Of course, that's not Midas to the Chasidus. Every Jew is mechuyev, according to the Shulchan Aruch, to say blessings. When you say eat food or whatever particular situation that either the Torah or the Rabbanon established a blessing, a bracha, so that now that's the halacha. That's not midah to Chasidus. So what is the midah, the Chasidus, the approach to the Chasidus that we're talking about here when we're talking about milah de brachas? So I can't find it now, but from what I remember offhand, is that, I think I mentioned this last week maybe, so you'll forgive me, is that, it's very often mitzvahs anoshim milamuda, things that a person tends to do become rote. And in point of fact, rote is a very useful thing. Habituation is an extremely powerful and very useful thing. Why did the Kodesh Baruch Hu give it this aspect of human nature of habituation? Is because there are certain things that for sure we want to put on autopilot. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't think too much about brushing my teeth in the morning. It's not something I go through a lengthy philosophical discussion about whether I should brush. It's on autopilot. Why? Because I was taught from a young age to brush my teeth, and so I brush my teeth without thinking about it. So, and that's very useful. Why? Because it clears the decks that a person is able to use his conscious mind for things which require it, and his mind doesn't get cluttered up with a lot of things that he doesn't really, that are already rote, and it's a chesed of Hashem to give us that quality, so to speak, of habituation, of habit. On the other hand, habit is an enemy in some ways, and habit, for surely, when it comes to davening or to saying brachas, is something we all know is a challenge we have to face the whole time. One of the reasons why it's very good to learn Hilchas Shabbos. Chofetz Chaim says Shabbos is very complicated, and without learning it all the time, for sure a person's going to make a mistake somewhere along the line. Similarly, Hilchas Brachas, when you learn about brachas, it takes, if nothing else, apart from making your performance more accurate, it sensitizes you to the fact of what it is that you're doing when you're making a bracha. These are things that left to themselves, left to their autopilot, will become very automatic. So the Chasidus part of Milid de Brachas that we're talking about, if you want to become a Chassid, that's the approach, is, according to this opinion, to focus on saying brachas with kavanah, to stop and think what it is I'm saying, to be mechavan Shem Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei Hoya Hova Yira, that Hashem is the master of all, that He was, is, and will be, that He exists outside of time, etc., etc. Elokeinu, Baal HaKochos Kulam, master of all possibilities and powers. When a person, that's the idea when it comes to midah de brachas. And of course, similarly, when the law of damages, it's not just a question of what do I do now? Now I smashed up your car. It's going through one's life with an awareness of being careful about other people's property. A person who learns milida, the nezikin, the concerns, the responsibilities of protecting other people's property and not damage other people, will have a different proactive attitude to life. He'll be much more careful with other people's property. He will think, if can I borrow this book, or is the person makpid upon it? Can I take this pen and use it? He'll be much more aware of things which may cross the line of gezel, of theft in some way. And again, and the same thing with the laws of ethics, with Milida Avos. When a person is involved in studying ethics on a deeper level, this sensitizes himself to his relationship between both him and Hashem, and him and his fellow man. Okay, let's move on. So the next paragraph, Gemilas Chasodim hu Ika Godol leHachosid. He's now going to talk about that, what we call in English loving kindness. It's interesting because the Hebrew expression is Gemilut Chasudim, which is, Gmul is to bestow, to give to bestow. So the idea of chesed is always connected with the idea of Gemilas Chasodim. And this really actually is expressing a very deep idea, because the idea of kindness is something which, by its definition, has to be proactive. It's not, you can't be a kind person in a vacuum. You can't be a kind person unless you do kindness. The whole idea of chasidus, this level of which we call saintliness, really comes from the word of goimel chesed, to do kindness. So that's what he says here. The word, the idea of Gemilas Chasodim comes from the word chesed, kindness. And as Chazal teaches in Avos, Al Shalosh Devarim Ha'olam, or he made the world stands on three things. Ve'echad mehem is Gemilas Chasodim. One of those is one of the fundamental pillars of the world, meaning that that's one of the reasons why Hashem created the world. And in point of fact, as it says in the beginning of Derech Hashem, the whole point of the world really is, the world is an expression of chesed. This world is no more, so to speak, than Hashem's expression of his desire to do good to another, meaning mankind. Excuse me. So, one of the pillars of the world, Torah and Avoda and Gemilas Chasodim, Gemilas Chasodim goes to the very root of the reason for the creation. And he's going to speak now a little bit about this idea that seeing as the whole creation is really an act, an enormous act of chesed, of kindness, that the Kodesh Baruch Hu created, he allowed to exist, this existence, the world, the universe, whatever you want to call it, was in itself the ultimate act of chesed. So for a person to want to rise up the spiritual ladder, to get to this level, he is in essence B'Tselem Elokim, imitatio Deo, like being like God. And he says, it says very central importance, as I said. And also, he's going to go off and say now that it says in Peah that Gemilas Chasodim is one of those things, echad me'adavarim she'oichel ha'peres ha'onos, that a person eats the fruit in this world, v'hakeren ke'emes lo la'olam haba. It's something which a person can enjoy in this world. The nature of a person, the nefesh and the neshama of a person derives pleasure from doing chesed. I think we all know this. And it's something which the principle, it's not that he eats it up in this world, it stays for him in the world to come. It also says in Sota that Dorash Rabbi Simlai Torah Tchilasa Gemilas Chasodim v'Sofa Gemilas Chasodim. The Torah begins with kindness and it ends with kindness. And what are those two things? He doesn't say here, but from what I remember, the beginning of Gemilas Chasodim is the Torah begins with Chesed because Hashem, the mere creation of man, was a Chesed, and the end of the Torah where HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself buries Moshe Rabbeinu, And we know that one of those, the greatest Gemilas Chasodim that you can do is to do something for somebody who's passed on from this world, because there's no way they can ever pay you back. So that's one of the understandings of what it means that this world, the Torah, begins and ends with Gemilas Chasodim. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Gedolah Gemilas Chasedi Yosem and a Tzedakah. And also he's now again going into more details about Gemilas Chasodim. Rabbi Elazar says, Gemilas Chasodim is greater than tzedakah, than charity. Doing kindness is greater than charity. Shneimar says in the Pasuk Hosea, Ziru lochem letzedakah u kitzru lefi chesed. So, according to tzedakah, charity, righteousness, and harvest according to chesed. Sow for yourself with charity and reap with loving kindness. And he says, why is that? It says over there, Gemilas Chasodim, kindness is greater than tzedakah in three ways. Why? Tzedakah is something that you can only do with your money. Gemilas Chasodim you can do with your body, with your guf. You can give somebody a ride in your car. You can take somebody shopping if they're go do the shopping for them. There are many things where tzedakah really principally only revolves around giving somebody money. But Gemilas Chasodim is greater because it's something that you can do with your whole body, not just with your money. Tzedakah is something you can only give la'aniyim. Tzedakah, when you give money to somebody who doesn't need it, that's not called tzedakah. It may be a very nice thing to do, but tzedakah has to be with poor people. Gemilas Chasodim is le'inim l'shirim. But doing kindness, you're not restricted to just poor people. You can do a kindness to rich people just as well as you can do to somebody who's poor. And tzedakah can only be given to people who are alive. Gemilas Chasodim bein l'chaim, bein l'mesim. You can do for people who are alive and also people who are dead. As we said before, for example, like burying somebody. And also, let's say, for example, lo aleinu, when a person loses somebody close to him, he can do the chesed of learning in their memory, which brings koras ruach, pleasure in the world to come to the neshama by saying kaddish for a person who's departed. That also is a chesed that a person can do for somebody once they've left this world. Now, I made a note here at the bottom. If you remember, we spoke about the three things of Mili de Brachas and Mili de Nazikin, matters of benedictions, of blessings, matters of damages, and we spoke about the first being Ben Odom, between man and God, second between man, and the third one is a combination of the two. I was also thinking that it could be that another way to look at Mili de Avos, ethics, is really, as we said before, that a man has three relationships. He has a relationship with God, he has a relationship with other people, but he also has a relationship with himself. It could be, I'd like to say that Mili de Avos is the idea that it turns a person into a more ethical person, a higher person. And that's not just because his relationship with Hashem is improved and his relationship with his fellow beings is improved, but it makes him a higher person. So that impacts, Mili de Avos impacts on his relationship with himself. Okay, I see that we are not going to be able to get to the end of this particular section. That's okay. So we'll leave off here. And we'll start off next week, B'ezrat Hashem, with this idea of the reciprocity of Hashem's relationship with us. As it says, "V'nosen lecha rachamim v'richamecha." He will give you mercy when he have mercy on you. In other words, Hashem is merciful, midah keneged midah. How do they say that in English? Measure for measure, for those who are merciful. That's what we'll start with next week, and we'll explore that in some depth, B'ezrat Hashem.